Dodging your fate isn't about luck or dramatic life decisions. Instead, it's about recognizing the patterns that quietly guide your life. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your life keeps producing the same outcomes and how to intervene in the patterns that shape your future. Most people confuse fate and destiny, but they are not the same. Fate unfolds by default, the predictable outcome of your habits, your identity, your environment, and the patterns you repeat without thinking. If nothing changes, fate does its job. Destiny, on the other hand, is not guaranteed. It's a potential that only becomes real through deliberate intervention. Fate is pattern-driven. Destiny is choice-driven. Fate happens when identity runs on autopilot. And destiny becomes possible only when identity is consciously disrupted and reshaped. And most people never notice the autopilot running their day-to-day choices. You don't fall into destiny. You move toward it. Understanding this difference changes how you see every choice, big or small. The moment you understand this distinction, something shifts. You stop asking why your life keeps repeating itself, and you start seeing exactly where and how to interrupt the pattern. Most people believe life is shaped by rare, dramatic choices, career shifts, relationships, turning points. That belief is comforting, and it's wrong. What shapes a life is not isolated decisions, but stable response patterns that operate across ordinary, repeated situations. These patterns, repeated over years, produce the outcomes that people later call fate. A future becomes constrained when responses become predictable. When the same internal reactions fire in the same contexts, outcomes stop changing. And over time, this convergence feels inevitable. People say, "This is just how my life turned out." Psychologically, this isn't fate. It's behavioral inertia embedded in your nervous system. Your brain doesn't aim to make you feel free. It aims to make you efficient. This is getting really hot here. That inertia exists because the brain values efficiency over freedom. Behaviors you repeat become easier to access, and behaviors you rarely use become harder. Repetition turns deliberate action into automatic response. So when you're stressed, tired, or uncertain, your nervous system reaches for the easiest available response. Insight alone doesn't help. Your brain does what it can access, not what it knows you should do. Under pressure, the automatic dominates. Stress magnifies this effect. So when your prefrontal cortex, the seat of planning and impulse control, is under load, your working memory shrinks and default responses take over. That's why fate is often decided not in calm reflection, but in moments of tension, urgency, or threat. Think about the meetings where you stay quiet, the message you don't send, the boundary you feel and then ignore. Those moments don't feel dramatic, but they repeat, and your trajectory crystallizes there. Patterns don't operate globally. They activate in specific situations. Behavior is context dependent. You don't dodge fate by changing one thing once. You dodge it by responding differently again and again in the situations that consistently trip you up. And if you ignore them, they quietly determine your next year, your next promotion, your next relationship turn. These aren't big heroic acts. They're small choices in the moments that quietly decide everything. If you keep avoiding tough conversations at work, your career doesn't explode or collapse. It slowly stalls. If you say yes too often, stay silent, or delay decisions, it feels safe in the moment. But over time, it quietly costs you influence, opportunity, and leverage. Start by picking one recurring high-leverage situation this week. One where your usual response has produced the same outcome. And notice the first cue inside of you, the tightening, the impulse, the familiar thought that usually drives your behavior. Then choose an alternative response you can actually execute. Pause, assert a boundary, speak early, act before certainty arrives. What makes these moments decisive is that emotions don't reset cleanly between encounters. Emotions have momentum. How you react once biases how you react next. Avoidance, anger, or over-accommodation carries forward. Acting before that momentum takes over, that's leverage. Awareness of your early internal cues, the tightness in the chest, the mental pressure, the urge to default, is your opening. And dodging fate happens there. Over time, these reactions organize into self-reinforcing systems. Most repeated patterns operate as micro-feedback loops. Small behaviors trigger expectations. Expectations trigger internal cues, and cues reinforce the behavior again. Avoiding conflict at home creates lingering tension and erodes trust. Deferring financial or professional decisions trains your nervous system to default to inaction. Nothing dramatic happens. The outcome just becomes predictable. Breaking fate requires identifying these loops and intervening at the smallest actionable point, consistently. None of these loops change unless they enter awareness. Attention is your gatekeeper. The automatic behaviors persist because you don't see them. The old pattern dominates unless you notice the trigger and act differently. So you can't change a trajectory by thinking about it abstractly. You change it by noticing the micro moments where your body and mind are preparing to repeat the old response. And noticing familiar anxiety before avoiding a major presentation gives you a choice. And that choice disrupts the pattern that's been limiting your visibility. As these patterns repeat, they don't just shape outcomes, they shape your identity. Because who you are isn't fixed. It's formed by what you repeatedly do. Identity isn't just self-concept. It filters what feels possible. If someone sees themselves as not disciplined, bad with confrontation, or unlucky in relationships, their nervous system enforces those assumptions. When a behavior clashes with who you think you are, it feels wrong, even when it works. So identity doesn't change through belief alone. It shifts through small, repeated actions. Each deviation provides evidence that your self-model can expand. And over time, identity reorganizes around what you repeatedly do. As a practical step, identify one belief about yourself that limits action. In a high-leverage situation this week, act against it. Notice the discomfort. Stay with it, and document the results. Identity stabilizes through repetition, and habits consolidate through repeated activating of your neural circuits. Small actions, repeated consistently, rewire the brain. And one deviation doesn't change much, but repeated context-specific deviations do. Consistently confronting uncomfortable but high-stakes situations, giving direct feedback, setting firm boundaries, addressing financial responsibilities immediately, reshapes long-term outcomes. Each repetition creates a measurable shift in trajectory. This process is slow because the brain prioritizes immediate relief. Avoidance reduces discomfort now. Overcommitment earns short-term approval, and procrastination releases tension. The delayed costs don't register clearly, so the pattern persists. That's why micro-interventions work. They're executable under pressure, neurologically encoded, even when the payoff arrives later. So for every recurring trigger you identify, practice one small alternative response, repeatedly, until it becomes easier than the old one. And as repetitions accumulate, change stops feeling effortful. The old pathway weakens, the new one strengthens, and identity follows behavior. So early revisions aren't failure. Systems stabilize around the strongest available pattern. The dominant response only changes when the alternative has been reinforced across repeated contexts. And motivation alone doesn't produce durable change, but practice under pressure does. If your default responses aren't interrupted, they continue indefinitely. That isn't destiny, it's inertia. And inertia only breaks when a different response shows up, consistently. None of this is fixed. The same neuroplastic mechanisms that shaped your current trajectory are still active. You don't need to change everything. You only need to intervene in the recurring moments that quietly decide everything. So identify one this week. Act differently. Repeat. Track the result. What looks dramatic from the outside feels procedural from the inside. So that's how trajectories loosen, your options expand, and predictable outcomes, what people call fate, are dodged. So even one small interruption today can ripple through months of outcomes you thought were inevitable. And this is the step anyone could take. Notice, interrupt, and repeat. Dodging your fate isn't about luck or motivation. It's noticing your triggers, interrupting automatic responses, and training your brain through repetition. Do it enough times, and choice replaces predictability. That's how fate stops running the show. Hey guys, thank you for watching my channel, Henry's Millions. Please like and subscribe to support the channel. And if you found this discussion today of ours useful, please share it with a friend. I think that's good. Is that good? All right, thanks.